we got to Fort Wrangell in southeastern Alaska. And Fort Wrangell had been a fort where we had soldiers there. And of course, it wasn't that long before that Alaska became a possession of the United States. But we had soldiers there in Fort Wrangell before they finally figured out that there was nothing to take care of there, because the Indians there were very docile, they were wonderful people and very calm. And so the soldiers moved out, and Fort Wrangell was sitting there completely empty. So this is what Mrs. McFarland and I found. There were there were about half a dozen of those Indians there who spoke English, who had come there from British Columbia and had been Christians there in British Columbia. The church the Church of England had been in British Columbia, and when the soldiers were at Fort Wrangell, they hired these Indians to come in and cut firewood for them. And they were absolutely amazed when these Indians wouldn't work on Sunday. And they said, what's the big deal? And they said, because we're Christians. Where'd that come from? And it was because they came over from British Columbia. And after I got back here, I went from here then to the East Coast on a fundraising mission for Alaska, because there needed to be schools. The one thing that I'm really, besides being Christianity, the one thing that I'm really for, and that's schools. There were no schools there, and there needed to be. And that's what Mrs. McFarland said. So I got there on the East Coast, and I was in this big meeting one day, and I said, I told them what had happened about Mrs. McFarland being there. And they said, you mean winter coming on, and you left this woman there with 1,000 heathens and no white people anywhere around? And I said, that's right, I did. And I said, not only that, but I said, she has no house, no school, no books, no other white person around. She's the nurse, the doctor, the undertaker, the preacher, the teacher, the mayor, and has no supplies of any kind. Now, what are you going to do about it? That was one of my best fundraising trips I made. And so we were able to fund a lot of the things that she was doing, and she did a great job there, a wonderful job. And as time went on, we were able to bring more people there to help her out and build churches and schools with bells. And she did a wonderful, wonderful job. After a few years of working in southeastern Alaska, I was contacted by Mr. Healy, who was the captain. Captain Healy was the captain of the Bear. And the Bear was a cutter for the United States government. And Captain Healy went all the way up to Port Barrow once a month in the summertime, and he made that trip up there. And I asked if I could go with him because I wanted to see what the conditions were there. And I found deplorable conditions. The Eskimos there were starving to death. And I was thinking about schools, of course, and I said, how in the world can a student study when they're starving to death? Some of the things, what had happened is that these Eskimos up there had been used to eating whale blubber, and they had caribou and fishing. Well, several things happened. Once the white man came, the white man had more advanced hunting techniques, and they were either killing the caribou or driving them off. They were, the whales were being decimated, and so there were literally hundreds, or there were lots of villages who were being completely starved to death there. And another problem that they had was that the white man brought whiskey. And so many of these men there just never did get around to hunting for the winter season. Now when you think about, 23 hours of darkness, it ain't easy to hunt. caribou in that kind of situation, especially when they have to chase them very far. And they had dogs, and they had dog sleds, so they could go a ways, but one of the problems there was the dogs were eating the same thing that humans did. So if they had to go very far to get these caribou, then they had to carry a lot of food, which were taking food away from their families. So they were in a dire situation. In talking with Captain Healy, we said, you know, what in the world can we do? And we were visiting with some other people who happened to come from Siberia. And they said, the Siberians in northern Siberia, central and northern Siberia, wasn't having this kind of a problem. They were not starving. And so we had to investigate and find out why. And the why was reindeer. There were no reindeer in Alaska. There were lots of caribou, but caribou cannot be domesticated. Reindeer can. And so we started investigating this problem, this situation. Reindeer don't even like grass, even though, you know, if it's covered with snow, not a big deal. They don't even like grass, they don't like hay. Reindeer eat moss. And there was enough, we investigated the situation, and we figured there's enough moss in northern Alaska to feed 9 million reindeer. And so we started talking about how in the world we could do this. I contacted the churches, I contacted the government, I contacted everybody to see if we couldn't start bringing some reindeer into Alaska. Of course, everybody thought I was crazy, but so Captain Healy and I gathered enough money to be able to barter with the Siberians and get a few head of reindeer and bring them into Alaska just to prove to people that we could do it. And we did. The first group was only like 16 or so reindeer, but we got them to Alaska. Once we had the reindeer there, then the next problem was, it's a little bit like South Park. You know, people say you can raise quinoa in South Park and they can make a fortune. But the ranchers in Fireplace or in South Park say, no, we're ranchers, we're not farmers. And so that's as far as it gets. Same situation here. These Eskimos said, wait a minute, no. We're fishermen and we're hunters. We're not herdsmen. And we had to prove not only to the people back east to send us some money to buy some reindeer, but we had to prove to the Eskimos that this would keep them alive. And when you start thinking about it, this is the first time, number one, they had no pack animals other than dog sled. This, now they could have a pack animal. The reindeer were easily herded. This is the first time that their children could, after they got to a certain age, could have milk. They had no milk before that. Now they could have milk from the reindeer. So there was a lot of reasons, and they could have meat year-round. So I started fighting the battle, and it was a difficult battle, and I fought it for years. And finally, I got a few more reindeer and a few more reindeer. At one point in time, the Russians shut us off from getting reindeer out of Siberia, and I had to go to Lapland to get the reindeer. A little bit of a side that I found in Lapland, and I wrote this up in an article sent to the paper, and I don't know that anybody believed it, but it's true. And that is, how do the mamas keep their babies quiet during the sermon on Sunday at church in Lapland? What they do is the family comes in the family reindeer, and you saw the picture here of the family reindeer with the cutter, with the sleigh. They bring the family up, tie up the reindeer near the church, and then Papa Lap gets out and digs a hole in the snow. Mama Lap wraps her baby in furs and sticks her in the hole. And then they put the snow around the baby and pack the snow down good and tight, and then they take the family dog and lay the family dog to protect the baby. And the baby is there all the time during the service. And never once have we ever heard of any of those babies being frozen or damaged in any way. And I wonder how our pink little babies in this part of the world would handle that situation. So the reindeer, it took years and years, and we had to bring lap herders to come to Alaska to train the Eskimos how to become herdsmen. And of course, in all the schools that we started, that was one of the main subjects, was how to be a herdsman and take care of these reindeer. At one time, we had over 200,000 reindeer in Alaska. And now, of course, there are snowmobiles and airplanes, and there are still 20,000 reindeer in Alaska. But one of the things that the reindeer really helped with was during World War II, when the Army was there, they had a lot of trouble being able to get supplies to the soldiers there in Alaska. And so these reindeer absolutely saved a lot of people's lives, a lot of the soldiers' lives. And the hides became leggings to help keep soldiers warm. Getting back to the reindeer in Alaska, virtually those reindeer saved thousands of lives, and we feel that it was the thing for the time. And Captain Healy and his U.S. Ship, the Bear, was instrumental in bringing all of those reindeer. At one time we had, as I said, the Russians shut us off from getting reindeer out of Siberia, and we had to go to Lapland to get them. And then some of them came through New York. And people not understanding what these reindeer were like had fed them hay, and they became sick, and we lost about half of that herd that was coming from Lapland at that time. But so travel was my thing, and keep going west was my thing. And the last trip that I made was in 1900. And April 23rd of 1900, I left to do another reindeer buying trip. And it was a rough trip through ice packs and dense fog in the north of Siberia, in the Arctic. And upon arrival, I found that an epidemic had come through and had killed between 25 and 50% of the population there. And all of the marketplaces where I was buying reindeer were closed and unable to get in. I was only able to get 21 reindeer that year. And the next time that I wanted to go, by the way, I traveled 5 months on that trip, and I traveled 16,587 miles. I had been sick since 1885, but no one knew it. I kept it very close to my chest, and I was in almost constant pain. And in 1903, then, I was going to go back for another trip, and the doctor said, absolutely not. And so that was the last time that I had been to Alaska. So I turned all of those things over to someone else. And then I went back east, and all I did back there was make speeches on behalf of the education system and the churches in Alaska, and raised I was able to raise a lot of money doing that. And in 1908, we were living in Washington, D.C. at the time, and Mary and I decided to go to New England on vacation. And we were there a short time, and on the way back, Mary became ill, and she died in 1908. In 1909, my illness finally caught up with me, and on May 2nd in 1909, I died. Travel was my thing. From Denver, when I was in Denver, from Denver to Montana, that was a trip 1,500 miles each. When I went to Arizona from Denver, it was 2,000 miles. In the 13 years that I was in Colorado, I averaged 26,540 miles a year. And between 1890 and 1900, I made 32 trips to northern Siberia. And each of those trips was 17,000 to 20,000 apiece. And those were all for reindeer. In 1 year, I traveled 37,625 miles. In the 50 years, from 1859, when I graduated from seminary, until 1909, when I died, I traveled just short of 1 million miles. And some estimates are just over 1 million miles, but it was in that area. My travel was by foot, by rail, by buckboard, by army ambulance, by lumber wagon, by mule team, by ox cart, by bronco, by reindeer sled, by freight and construction team, train, steamship, dugout canoe, launch, war vessel, schooner, and cattle ship. And those were the days when I really feel that I was probably the most traveled person in that time period ever. So that was my life and my part of my Colorado. And that little white church there has been going 141 years, and it is it's full almost every Sunday. And we'd love to have anybody come and visit if you can. We have service at 10 o'clock every Sunday morning. And so at this time, are there any questions that anyone have? Yes?
Did Mary travel with you, or did she stay behind most of the time? Your wife.
I'm sorry?
Your wife, did she stay with you, or did she travel with you, or was
no,
she
basically never.
Behind? Okay.
No,
but
no, she was home. But and no one at that particular time wrote much about the women and the wives of people like this. And Mary was at home, and I know there are some things written about when I was in Minnesota. When I was in Minnesota, these people would come to her door all the time. And in fact, I had signs at the river that said, if you're Presbyterian particularly, come to this door, because we want to know who you are and where you're going, moving west of here. And I did the same thing. I had the Rocky Mountain Presbyterian, pardon me, that I published for many, many years. And here again, we were looking for anybody that wanted to become associated with a church and where they were going, so that we could follow them and possibly build a church there. There are pictures of churches at Irwin, Colorado. Anybody ever heard of Irwin, Colorado? I don't think so. I haven't either. And I don't think it exists anymore. But there's a beautiful white church exactly like the one in Fairplay in the middle of that picture of that town. And I think it was a mining town, and it just doesn't exist anymore. And but Mary was extremely busy. She had people coming to her door all the time from everywhere. And she did a lot of the writing. She did a lot of the communication. And it was, I might say that there's a man by the name of Willard, Francis Willard wrote this. He said, "You are one of my heroes. You stood for all the gospel means, not in a luxurious parish or a splendid college, but out yonder on the edge of things, where God's most friendless children turn toward you with eyes of hope." And I like that, on the edge of things. Yes, ma'am.
Did he ever have children?
Yes. Yes, we did. We had 4 girls. And the first daughter died in childbirth in Galesburg, Illinois. The second daughter, I think I mentioned, died just after we came to Colorado, about 2 weeks after we were in Colorado. She died, and we had to, we took her body back and buried her with her sister in Galesburg, Illinois. I had 2 other daughters who grew into maturehood, and one was an artist, and the other one was a lawyer in Washington, D.C. And yes, there were 4 girls altogether. Yes.
Tell us much more about the moving into what was the Catholic Church area of northern New Mexico and how that went.
That was not easy either. There was a Catholic priest in northern New Mexico who went around to everyone that he could find and said that you know, anyone that was Protestant was their marriages that weren't legal, their burials, their funerals weren't such that the person would end up in heaven, and spread a lot of rumors. And so it was very difficult there. They were kicked out of some places. We were kicked out of some places that we really shouldn't have been. And at some point in time, people learn to have to get along. Yes.
Did the Indians always accept you?
The Indians, it was amazing, and we did work a lot with Indians. Not only in Alaska. I talked mainly about Alaska, but we worked with the Indians and also in New Mexico, particularly. And for the most part, we got along with them here in this area. And in New Mexico, I actually convinced a tribe to let 6 of their boys go with me to Carlisle, Pennsylvania, to school. And those boys went to school in Pennsylvania.
Did they go to Carlisle?
They did go to Carlisle. How did you know that? At any rate, it was a very difficult time because I was trying to get them out of Santa Fe, and it so happened at that time I had all 6 of them in a rooming house there. And there was an Indian uprising not too far away, and some white folks were killed. And so there was a general panic, and anyone that had Indian blood was really in trouble. And so I had to really sneak these 6 boys out of Santa Fe, but I did get them onto Carlisle in Pennsylvania. Other questions? Travel was the thing. It was difficult. It was hard, but it was necessary. And because of that, there were many, many churches that sprouted up. And but the big thing, I think, also is the schools, because Sheldon Jackson believed in education. I could go on and on about what happened in Alaska. In Alaska, the authorities there did not want the Indians and the Eskimos, the native Alaskans, to be educated, because then they would lose control. And so Sheldon Jackson was thrown in prison twice for no apparent reason. And finally, Sheldon Jackson had to go to President Cleveland in order to get some satisfaction. And at that time, President Cleveland removed the governor and the U.S. Marshal and the district attorney from Alaska and replaced them with others who were somewhat better. But this was, and as you notice on the bulletin on your table there, that there's also the Sheldon Jackson College in Sitka, Alaska, and that was very good. That college is now closed, but it's now a museum, and if anyone gets there, and there's a lot of Alaskans. We were in Alaska 2 years ago. A lot of people have never heard of Sheldon Jackson, but I think it's pretty cool, his name. Yes?
How many churches did you say are left in Colorado that you built?
In western U.S., he built 100, just over 100. But that included Colorado and Montana. He built between 1870 and in 1872, when he built the one in Fairplay, or when he started the one in Fairplay. But between 1870 and 1872, he started churches in Pueblo, Georgetown, Idaho Springs, Golden, Greeley, Evans, Longmont, Central City, Colorado Springs, and Fairplay. And at the same time, he built 5 in Montana, 1 in Utah, and 1 in Wyoming.
How many of these still stand in Colorado?
I'm sorry?
How many of them still exist besides the Fair Play one? Do you know?
I think a lot of those still exist.
Georgetown.
Yeah, and the Presbyterian Church, there's been a slight split in the Presbyterian Church recently, and where the Presbyterian churches stand with gay marriage. And so some of those churches are still Presbyterian churches, but they have gone another route. And so, but most of those, there were 9 also in this period of time. Besides those I mentioned, there were 9 that were built and the towns no longer existed or didn't exist. In 1909, they didn't exist when this book was written. They were gold camps that I screwed up on and felt that they would continue and didn't. Yes?
Didn't you say that you haven't been able to find any of Sheldon Jackson's sermons? Because he must have been a pretty dynamic speaker.
Sheldon Jackson had to be a very dynamic person. And he was very meticulous, and he wrote all the time. He wrote on horseback, he wrote, you know, wherever he was, whenever he was going. There are a zillion letters that he wrote, but I can't find any of them. But I have a lot of the letters that were written to him, like the one from Della Sphinx. And he kept a lot of those, explaining what was happening in Fair Play. Della Sphinx had a hard time getting out of Fair Play. He finally did, but it was very difficult. And in years to come, Mrs. Della Sphinx was the one who became a leader of the Women's Society nationwide, and she became very, very well known. No one ever heard of Della Sphinx after a while. But, yeah. Any other questions? Well, if there are any, let me know, but thank you for listening.
Thank you again for coming, everybody. Thank you, John, for the spectacular educational information on this wonderful Presbyterian minister. I had never heard of him until you, so this is great. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you to all of my people who have donated this wonderful dinner tonight for everyone here. Linda Watson made the moose stew. Jim Sennett provided the beef stew. And the Wessex Station provided the elk stew for us. I made the cornmeal stew. I had the carrot cake, macaroni, everything was donated. Thank you so much for coming. And our next one is November 21st, and that's Rex Rideout. So we're going to try and have him do something more on the upbeat side, or around stuff, something more moving, I guess, rather than what he, well, anyway. It's going to be, no matter what he does, we all love him. So thank